Welcome back to Game Over Movie Reviews. My name's Peter. It's horror time. For long-time fans of the channel, you know who you both are. You'll know that my favourite movie genre is horror, and I will always gravitate towards a horror film 9 times out of 10. I watched 107 brand new films in 2021, and 29 of those were horror. So let's get them ranked, because without order, there is only chaos. Number 29, A Classic Horror Story. It really wasn't. Yes, A Classic Horror Story was my least favourite horror of 2021. I do have a 2-minute review of this one on my channel, but in summary, this film tries to be several different things at the same time and does none of them successfully. It also has a painful third act where the film really jumps the shark. And not literally, because that would have been a better ending. Number 28, VHS 94. I know I'll get a bit of pushback on this one because this was quite popular in the horror community, but I think I'm kind of done with these kind of horror anthologies where a different director directs every segment. I'd heard many times that Timo Tjarjanto's section was utterly crazy, and I suppose it was, but at the same time, I just found it painfully dull. The morgue story is quite creepy, the sewer story was silly but mildly entertaining, but in general, the whole film was just very unengaging and amateurish. But perhaps that's all on me, because I haven't watched the other 93 films in the VHS series and just jumped straight to the 94th. Number 27, Old. Another one where I have a 2-minute review on the channel, but to summarise, I found this one to be a failure on almost every level. The script and dialogue are utterly horrendous, and Shyamalan seems very happy to just go with his actor's first take every time. Just think of all the ways you could write a story about people growing to old age in a day. Think of all those juicy story implications. I just don't think Shyamalan did think about those implications. I really miss early M. Night Shyamalan. Number 26, In the Earth. This is probably one of my most disappointing films of 2021. I enjoy Ben Wheatley's first few films, especially Kill List and Sightseers, so I was excited to see him back to horror after a few films away, but no, I just found this to be extremely weak. I'm not sure what this film was aiming for. 2 incredibly bland leads, wishy-washy ITV drama-style performances, and a dull story which felt as it was being made up as the film progressed. It's been a long time since a film made so little connection with me. Number 25, Peninsula. Again, I have a full review of this one in a video where I also reviewed Soul Station and Train to Busan. And Peninsula was a major letdown for me. This following one of the best zombie movies of all time, the very same creative team decided to do a kind of Mad Max meets Fast and Furious with some zombies. And it also contains PlayStation 3 quality levels of CGI. Peninsula was a huge disappointment. Number 24, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. Just a shockingly bland horror film all round. The screenplay is very by the numbers and it does nothing surprising or interesting with this story. I was never once scared or tense, never really invested in the mystery, and never bought into the drama of the characters. There's some solid cinematography and lighting, and the cast are perfectly fine. Always great to see John Noble tune the scenery. But all in all, a very unengaging watch and a little bit of an insult to the first 2 films. Number 23, Spiral from the Book of Saw. This is in the so bad it's good but it's actually still bad category. Spiral has virtually no redemption, but for a shit film this did at least entertain me, mostly due to its super fast pacing, short run time, and Chris Rock's this must be a parody style performance. Honestly, swap Chris Rock for Marlon Wayans and you've got yourself a new scary movie. The direction, cinematography and editing are all full cringe, and those Dutch angles really got tiresome quickly. The traps were a little bit meh, and a couple didn't really make logical sense. And that sudden ending really made me laugh, and not in a good way. Number 22, Fear Street Part 3, 1666. Yeah, a bit of a bloated mess this one. The 1666 part felt overlong and kind of unnecessary. It probably could have been covered in a short flashback sequence, considering the important information it needed to get across for the story. The accents are among some of the worst I've ever heard. Benjamin Forrest Jr. must take proud place alongside Dick Van Dyke. It's one of the worst accents in film history. Kiana Madeira didn't fare much better, ranging from Irish to American to Jamaican at times. I would have happily taken a historically inaccurate American accent over these really shambolic efforts. The second half, which tied back to the first film, suffered a similar issue I had with part one. I just don't really care about these characters. It's a well-made film, apart from those accents, and the cinematography and lighting are great, but I was just getting a bit bored of it by the end. Number 21, Violation. A very well-made but drainingly nasty rape revenge film. Now, I can stomach a lot in my horror, but I do feel this film went too far at times. It's just so relentlessly bleak and dismal and vicious. There's some really stunning moments of cinematography with the scenery, and the cast are excellent, especially Madeleine Sims-Fewer, who goes above and beyond and earns every penny of her paycheck. But this is a horrible little film that I'll never watch again. Number 20, Vicious Fun. Another film I have a review for on my channel. This one was mildly entertaining and admittedly ended well with excellent potential for a sequel, but for me it wasn't vicious or fun enough. The biggest mistake this film makes is that it sets up a great premise with this kind of awkward nerd who accidentally stumbles into a committee meeting for serial killers. And he's got to try and fit in and pretend to be a serial killer to stay alive, which I just think is a really great idea. But it squanders this idea and goes into a relatively by-the-numbers, darkly comical cat and mouse slasher. It's fine and it's probably worth a watch. It's got its own sense of style and vibe, but I just feel there's a story potential that's been missed here. Number 19, Hunter x Hunter. This feels a little like two films battling with each other. The plot was seemingly very simple, but I had so many questions at the end. I just didn't get certain aspects. I'd heard this had some kind of big wow ending, but for me it was a little bit try-hard and not really well earned. It's well shot and I thought the whole cast was great, plus it did have my attention the whole way through as I was invested in trying to work out what was actually going on. In the end though, it just doesn't quite come together and I was left pretty frustrated. Number 18, Fear Street Part 1, 1994. This does kind of feel like an 18 slasher film made for teens. There's a few inventive kills, but it all feels a bit tame. There's no scares, no tension, and all the annoying teen characters don't seem to be overly troubled by what's going on. These are the kind of kids who think the death of 9 people at the start is funny. I do like the vibe of this film and the look of it and the lore of the 3 films back to back, plus a great soundtrack. Overall though, Fear Street Part 1 just came over a little bit like Stranger Things with a bit of blood. Just a bit weak. Number 17, this is going to be the controversial one. Malignant. Another one I have a full review on my channel and it's a video I'm pretty proud of, so take a look after you finish with this for my full thoughts and perhaps rage at me in the comments there. So schlocky stuff isn't really my bag, and whilst this film is undeniably entertaining, I just found it a little bit all over the place with its tone and its purpose. It has some terrible, purposefully OTT and cheesy performances, but at the same time, others are deadly serious. The same goes for the dialogue. For every cheesy line, there's a fully serious one. For every batshit moment, there's an earnest one. It just felt a bit all over the place and a bit of a mishmash of style and tone. Having said that, I do appreciate that James Wan made the film he wanted to make, and that police station scene was badass. Number 16, Coming Home in the Dark. This one's bleak and brutal, if a little forgettable. We've seen this kind of thing before, though it's all done pretty well for what is probably a very small budget. The cast are good, especially Daniel Gillies, and it was nice to see some nuance from all the main characters. There's a good blurring of the lines and good and bad, which make things a little more interesting. There were quite a few times when the pacing sagged just a little and it ended up where I expected it to. But this is a good effort and it's worth a watch. Number 15, We Need to Do Something. This one was kind of fun. A very simple setup. A family is trapped in a bathroom during a storm, but it seems there's something else more sinister outside. This is just the right side of knowing kitsch versus dark but silly horror. There are moments which are pretty silly, but there's always a dark underbelly. In some ways, especially tone, it reminded me of the 80s film The Gate. Pat Healy is gloriously over the top in a kind of Nicolas Cage kind of way. Fortunately, sticking in an explanation backstory was a real mistake for me. 1, because it wasn't particularly well done, and 2, because it took away from the present moment and more chances for scares and silliness. And it also removed some vagueness to what was actually happening. This one is daft, but I think it knows it is, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to. Number 14, Freaky. Freaky was fun enough, and I was happy and surprised with the gore and the violence of the kills. Vince Vaughn is clearly having a great time, and Catherine Newton has had a strong year with this film, and The Map of Tiny Perfect Things. This is probably the most polished film outside the top 10 on this list, but given it does what Happy Death Day did in taking a familiar plot and adding "but it's horror" to the end, I would have liked Freaky to push things just a little more and inject a few more of its own ideas. I just wish this had a bit more of everything. A few more laughs, more kills, more scares, more tension. Then they've just gone for it a little bit more. It was a fun film and I was definitely entertained throughout, but with a bit more spark, I think it could have been something special. Number 13, Censor. I like a lot of what Censor is trying to do. The murky topic brilliantly bleeds into the cinematography. Everything is grainy and smoky and absolutely full of foreboding atmosphere. And this film nails the vibe of the 80s underbelly and the films it focuses on. Sadly for me though, it doesn't quite go the distance with its premise and potential of its story. The central character and the mystery unravelled before I had a chance to be fully drawn in. I actually loved the final shots of the film, but the craziness which came before went in a direction which didn't quite work for me. But it's a bold and unique film and it gets a lot of credit from me for trying something different. Number 12, Silent Night. Similar to Censor, this is original, well made and has its own voice. But also similarly to Censor, it doesn't quite deliver the promise of its premise. Silent Night's main issue is that it straddles the broad BBC-style comedy with a serious what would you do style end of the world scenario. And I really wish this had played it straight from the start and dialed down some of the OTT performances. As a more serious film, this could have been so much more poignant, more relatable, more frightening, more memorable. It aims for silly tragedy and this makes some jarring tonal shifts towards the end of the film when it does get a little more serious. It's likeable, it's well worth a watch, but again, I do feel a big opportunity has been missed with the story on this one. Number 11, The Dark and the Wicked. This is a slow, creepy and atmospheric film with some decent, if slightly familiar scares. The Dark and the Wicked is another addition to the grief as horror subgenre, this one going down the something is haunting the family route. It's very well made and suitably creepy, but it's also a little forgettable, hence the shortness of this section. So before I delve into my top 10 horrors of 2021, what films have I missed off this list? Why am I crazy not to have Malignant at number 1? And what are your picks for horrors of 2021? Stick it all in the comments below and you might as well hit the subscribe and like button whilst you're down there.
That's what she said.
Number 10, The Block Island Sound.
Something's wrong. Something with the island. You know it, I know it. I want to get to the bottom of it.
I'm guessing this is one that not many viewers will have heard of. This is an atmospheric mystery, sci-fi, horror drama which keeps its cards close to its chest and ends with a big moment which will have you either going, "Oh, what?" or "Oh, wow." The drama and tension gradually build through the creepiness, but also through the lead character who is full of paranoia and desperation. You never truly know what's happening until that ending, and it's a film that has you guessing throughout. And it also has some absolutely fantastic sound design. This is definitely one to check out. Number 9, Fear Street Part 2, 1978.
Hello? It's not over.
I feel this is a better film than the other two parts in pretty much every way. The pacing is tighter, the script is sharper, the kills and the gore are more visceral, and there's some actual stakes and tension. We still get too many arsehole side characters, but the main characters all go through interesting changes during the course of the story, which meant by the end I was rooting for them all. The soundtrack and needle drops are great again and probably a little bit more natural than in the first film. And this is the only part of the trilogy which I felt worked really well on its own, whilst also bolstering the other two films with the meatiest part of the overall story. Number 8, Sator.
Every once in a while, I just wake up in bed. He's there. He talks to me.
Probably the least well-known film on this entire list, but I do have a review for this on my channel. And unusually, this film works better the more you know about it. It took Jordan Graham 7 years to make Sator, and it's based on a creature that his own grandmother, who stars in the film as herself, created during a troubled period in the 60s when she was committed to a psychiatric hospital. And Graham pretty much made this whole film on his own. He wrote, directed, shot and edited Sator, as well as having a hand in sound and colour correction and more. This is about as indie as horror gets. All that aside, it's an unsettling and odd little film full of striking imagery and slow burn scares which get under your skin. This won't be for everyone, but I urge you to read up on it and give it a chance. Number 7, My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To.
Do you have any idea what we do to get that blood?
Slow burn, thoughtful indie horror which reminded me of a more grounded take on Let the Right One In. This is essentially a family drama where the weakest member of 3 siblings is cared for by the other 2. In this case, that weakness is vampirism, or at least a more real-world illness virus version of vampirism. This won't be for everyone as the drama is in that simmering, never boiling style. Not that it doesn't have a few dramatic moments. There is barely any horror of the typical kind in this film, which is maybe a small criticism I had of it. I would have liked just a touch more. It's perhaps too grounded on this front. The 3 main actors all do an excellent job, especially Patrick Fugit as Dwight, and the film pushes this kind of indie horror look with a pretty cool 4:3 aspect ratio that really suits the film. This is probably one to look out for if you're after a family drama with a bit of bite. Number 6, The Vigil. Another film on this list that I don't think gets enough buzz or recognition, nor do I think enough people saw it. Yep, it's another horror as grief film. I really feel like these films are my jam. This one is a super simple, near single location haunted house style horror. And it's just brilliantly effective. The simple setup of a man asked to sit with a dead body to ward evil spirits away, whilst a very creepy and odd old lady shuffles around the house. I mean, it sells itself, doesn't it? Number 5, Anything for Jackson. This is a very cool horror film. I thought the story and general idea was fantastic, and though it touches on a few other films, it was great to see a modern horror which felt really original. The writing in general was very strong, and I liked the way the story was told with excellent use of flashbacks to give the film some more emotional weight. The gore is top notch, the ghosts were very creepy, especially the body contortionist and a flosser. That was nightmare fuel. Some of the performances are slightly B-movie, but this is well worth a watch and possibly the best film I've watched on Shudder. Number 4, The Empty Man.
The empty man, the empty man, the empty man.
Put me in the camp that finds this film unfairly treated and oddly underrated. Yes, it's far from a perfect horror film. The plot almost collapses under its own weight and probably could have done with streamlining a little. Some of the smaller part actors are not wholly convincing. The score is both overbearing and underwhelming. And there's a lot of exposition, especially in the explanation of the conclusion, although this exposition is at least written beautifully. But this is a brilliantly written, directed and edited film from debut director-writer David Pryor. James Badge Dale does a decent job in the lead, and I really thought there were quite a few well-done creepy sequences. The Empty Man is a bold and fantastic-looking film. I'm keen to see what Pryor does next, and I honestly don't get the hate for this film despite its flaws. Number 3, The Night House. This film is shot beautifully with some really clever framing which always has you aware of the background, and there are many viewer fake outs and red herrings here. Rebecca Hall, as expected, is awesome, and I thought her character was fantastically written. This could have easily gone down the route of the constantly terrified, always screaming female protagonist, but Hall's character is strong and feisty, and though she does get scared, she never feels weak. My one big issue with The Night House is that the whole film feels like a mystery, with Hall's character putting together the clues of this mystery, but then in the end, in the last 15 minutes, it goes very vague and leaves so many holes. But there's so much good stuff here, particularly the atmosphere, sound design, some story elements, and Rebecca Hall's performance, and I think if they'd landed the ending a little better, this could have been my number 1. Number 2, I'm only saying it once, Candyman.
They beat him, tortured him, killed him, right there on the spot.
I must admit that I let a few negative reviews for this film dampen my excitement and my pull to watch it. I really need to stop doing that because this film was excellent. I'm just not sure where the criticism comes from. Yes, the story is very on the nose and not at all subtle, but it's really well written and expands brilliantly on the lore of the original. It also understands the ethos and vibe of that first film. It's moody and slow and chock full of dread with plenty of grubby and vicious horror. And this is easily the best shot horror of the year. Horror's not really a genre which is full of technical marvels, but This one really does tick all the boxes. And that cinematography, it's so good. The inverted, foggy city tracking shots were just brilliant. Easily my favourite opening credit sequence of 2021. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II once again shows us what a star he is and just how versatile an actor he is. I'm so glad I went with my gut and gave this film a chance. So my number one horror of 2021 is A Quiet Place Part 2. Now yes, I know a few of you are probably wrinkling your nose up at this one. It's a fairly well received and popular film, but I guess it's a little bit safe in comparison to some of the other films on this list. But this kind of taut sci-fi horror action film, it really is my bag. I certainly prefer the first film, but this second does enough to justify its existence. I like that it's another pretty simple story following on from the bare bones original, and this helps keep the tension riding high. The cast are all exceptional, with Millicent Simmons giving us one of the best child performances of recent years. Things do feel a little episodic, but I think once we've got part 3, which is obviously inevitable, I wonder if this will turn into a TV series, because I think it will fit. And I'll be interested to see if Krasinski turns around on his decision to step away from this franchise. I really hope he returns. So there we have it, all the 29 horrors I saw in 2021 ranked. Not a great year for horror, I think we could probably all agree on that, but let's hope that 2022 is better. And it's already started really well with Scream. Oh look, another review I've got on my channel. Anyway, I'm boring myself now, so thanks for watching.
Game over, man. It's game over.